Sup, this is episode 23 of WOW, and it's about suicide and depression. Now, right off the bat, I'm going to tell you if you're uncomfortable with the subject, then you should keep scrolling right now because this is going to get a little deep and it's pretty long as well. Everybody knows someone who has committed suicide or thought of committing suicide. If I could make just one person think twice about taking their own life, I think that's worth the risk of any judgment I'll receive personally for what I'm about to say. I've been wanting to write about suicide for a very long time now, and my most recent attempt was in fall of 2016. There was a friend of the family who decided to take their own life. All suicides are tragic, but this one particularly stood out to me because it was a reminder that in the media, suicide is portrayed as something that only affects teenagers, where in fact it becomes more of a problem as we get older. The truth is the number of suicides per year almost triples by the time you hit the age group of 50 to 54. Life can change and become very difficult as we get older, sometimes too overwhelming and too much. I know about 10 people who have taken their own lives over the years. The first one when I was young, I was maybe about 9 or 10 years old. I can't remember exactly what age, but it was a family member. Now, I'd been to a few funerals around that time, and the one thing that I noticed that was different about this funeral was everybody was a lot more sad and there was more crying. When I asked how they died, no one wanted to tell me anything. Everybody was being very quiet and secretive, and I think it was my older brother who eventually told me that they had killed themselves. Now, this didn't really make me upset, but it made me kind of curious. I wondered, why would someone want to die? Why would somebody take their own life? The next one didn't happen until I was about 18 years old. I just came back from the SAC. I'd got my learner's permit. I was super excited. I bumped into a friend from high school. He was like, "What's up?" And I said, "Hey man, I just got my learner's permit." And with the sad look on his face, he told me that so-and-so had committed suicide the night before. I was in shock. It didn't make any sense. They're always so happy and everybody liked them. Why would they want to do that? And as the years went on, it started happening more often and always without warning. There have been many occasions over the years where friends have reached out to me, totally broken down, tell me they want to hurt themselves and they can't take their troubles anymore. But the ones that actually went through with it never gave a sign that anything was wrong. One in particular, I sat with my girlfriend at the time for 2 hours at the same restaurant we always attended, and I had no idea that after they dropped off my girlfriend and I, just a few hours later, they would take their own life. I never understood why until one day when I had my moment. Now, before I get into that moment, I want to quickly explain something while I'm talking about depression. For the purpose of this video, I'm going to break depression up into two simple categories without going into too many details, as depression is a pretty complicated thing. I'm no psychologist, so bear with me if I miss out on any important aspects I'm about to say, as well as feel free to add anything in the comments below. There is someone who suffers from depression, and then there is someone who's suffering from a depression. Depression is a mental illness. A depression is a mental state. Depression as a mental illness is something that's there regardless of external factors and usually doesn't go away on its own. Often medical intervention is required, as well as regular checkups to make sure that it's being managed properly. A depression is a mental state, and it can happen to anybody after such things as a divorce, loss of job, a death, etc., etc. It can last days, weeks, months, years. It can lead to depression as a chronic medical condition, depending on if the person was prone to developing depression to begin with, as well as the severity of whatever is causing the depression. I've only told a handful of people this, but there was one night in January 2007, while I was experiencing a depression, where I seriously contemplated committing suicide. I'm going to share that story, as well as the events leading up to it, why I didn't do it, and what I did in the aftermath. I'd never felt anywhere nearly as low before. I never have afterwards, nor will I ever, because the whole ordeal helped me to develop coping mechanisms to make sure to keep my head up when things are bad. It started in fall 2006. I was 25 years old. My father had become very ill, and just after that, my long-term girlfriend and I had broke up. By December of the year, I was becoming a mess, and I tried to reconcile our failed relationship. I was also starting school for sound engineering the next month, but that wasn't enough to counteract what was going on in my personal life at the time. What pushed me over the edge of what I could handle was when I found out that my ex had moved on. I honestly don't blame her, because our relationship had become toxic and it needed to come to an end at that time. And looking back now, I think it was more because my father was very ill that brought me to that level emotionally more than anything else. And it's not that I wouldn't have been upset, it's just not as upset as what was about to come. So it started as I was leaving school one day. A friend of mine calls me up, is like, "Hey, are you and so-and-so still together?" And I was like, "No." And then they tell me, Well, I think there's something you should see. So then he shows me pictures of my ex with her new guy. At first I felt extremely angry, but then something weird happened. After a while feeling a very powerful rage, I felt nothing. The next day at school I couldn't concentrate, and by the end of the day, this is when my extreme sadness started. I was DJing that night at a bar, and by the time I got there, I didn't even feel like DJing. I literally went into the DJ booth, put in a mix CD, and I went to the bar, sat down, and started drinking. My manager came up to me and said, "Hey, who's DJing tonight?" And I said, "I'm playing a mix CD, and I don't give a fuck if you fire me and you don't pay me." Even the barmaid that I knew was asking me, "Troy, what's wrong?" I didn't want to talk about anything, except more drinks. Now I only drink alcohol recreationally, but that night I was drinking to self-medicate. The more I drank, the sadder I became, and the sadder I became is the more I drank. I reached a point where I was so overwhelmed with my sadness, and I thought, hey, wait a minute, I should just kill myself. I didn't really have much going on at the time. I was overweight, I felt hopeless. It just made me too broken to be anything but negative. And I came to the conclusion that this was the best solution. And then I continued drinking, and I told myself, at the end of the night, I'm going to leave the venue and quietly execute on my plan. This cycle of drinking and sadness went on until one moment that allowed me to hold on. One random encounter with a random acquaintance. The thing is, we never know what effect we have on others, whether it's positive or negative. Luckily for me that night, this person had the most slightest, yet most significant positive effect on me. I can't even tell you exactly who it was. It's like one of these random people that I know from around bars that I just have respect for. Without any prior knowledge of my situation, they came up to me with a regular and sincere honesty and just said, "Hey, what's up, man? You alright?" I nodded and I let out a fake smile, and when they walked away, I thought to myself, wait a minute, I can't hurt myself. There's people who care about me. What about my friends? What about my family? Can't do that to them. And I decided, I'm like, I have to hold on. I have to get through this. And this in turn made me a different kind of sad. And I was ashamed that I was thinking about hurting myself. At this point, I was in the verge of tears. And I knew that I just had to leave. I had to go home. And when I got home, I started crying. And I cried for hours until I fell asleep. And when I woke up the next morning, I was still sad, but I was much better than the night before and well away from the danger zone. And each day after that, I felt better and better. I focused all my negative energy into positive and productive things. I discovered writing. I started writing poetry anytime I needed to express certain things. I started to appreciate little things in life and learn not to stress out over things that are beyond my control. And I came up with ways to change my perspective when things didn't work out the way I hoped them to. And I try to laugh as much as possible and not take everything so seriously. Since that day, life hasn't always been perfect, but I think of all the positive experiences I've had and all the positive experiences that are yet to come. And I think life is worth living no matter what age you are or no matter what you're going through. It's never too late to start over. Things do get better eventually. Everyone's going to go through some kind of depression at some point or many points in their life. As life can be very unpredictable and unpleasant at sometimes, I sincerely hope that if that day ever comes for you, you'll keep your head up as the storm will pass. If you are having dark thoughts, I've left some links in the video description for some different options for crisis centers across the continent. So what are your thoughts? Have you ever had a depression that you almost couldn't deal with? How do you cope during emotionally distressful times? Let me know in the comments below. Also, if you know someone who would find this video helpful, feel free to share with them, because sharing is caring. I'll be posting episode 24 next week. I post a new episode every Wednesday, and in the meantime, you can email me at tc@troycarter.com if you have something you want me to talk about, as well as subscribe to my YouTube channel so you'll be the first to know when I post something new. Peace.